It was supposed to be the perfect autumn getaway. 5 cousins, Ethan, Claire, Jordan, Mia, and Lucas, decided to escape the city for one last adventure before winter set in. They were close, more like siblings than cousins, and every year they picked a new destination. This time, their curiosity led them to a place whispered about in ghost stories: the old Hollow Creek farmhouse. Hidden deep within the forest, the crumbling property had been abandoned for decades, with rumors of strange happenings tied to its land. The night they left, the sky was moonless, the kind of black where the road disappears into nothing. Their car was packed with camping gear, snacks, and recording equipment. Jordan insisted on filming everything for a paranormal vlog he was starting, while Claire brought along a Ouija board as a joke. They laughed at the idea of being scared. None of them believed in curses or hauntings, but all admitted it added a thrill to the trip. The air in the car was lighthearted, filled with music and teasing, until they reached the forest. As soon as the car crossed into Hollow Creek, the atmosphere shifted. The cousins noticed the trees pressed closer, blocking the stars and swallowing the sound of their music. The road grew narrower, and the headlights seemed weaker against the endless dark. Lucas, who was driving, joked that it felt like the forest was alive, trying to keep us in. Nobody laughed this time. Still, none of them wanted to admit they were unnerved, so they pressed forward. By the time they arrived at the farmhouse clearing, the night had turned unsettlingly quiet. The air felt colder, and the usual hum of crickets and owls was absent. The cousins stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the thick silence. The farmhouse stood in front of them, its roof sagging, windows shattered, walls crawling with ivy. Something about the place seemed wrong, but Ethan reminded them it was all part of the adventure. They pitched their tents nearby, laughing louder than necessary, as if to drown out the creeping dread that none of them could shake. What they didn't realize was that their laughter would be the last sound anyone ever heard from them. The moment they unzipped their tents and set foot on that soil, the story of the Hollow Creek farmhouse was no longer just a legend. It was about to claim its newest victims. The farmhouse had a reputation that stretched back nearly half a century. Locals claimed the land itself was cursed, tainted by something older than the building that sat on it. Stories said a family once lived there in the early 1900s, but one by one they died mysteriously. Children first, then the parents, until no one was left to claim the property. Since then, anyone who dared to stay overnight spoke of hearing footsteps under the floorboards, voices whispering their names, and shadows moving across the walls when no light was present. The house, they said, breathed with the earth beneath it. Despite these legends, the cousins brushed it off as folklore meant to scare children. To them, the farmhouse wasn't haunted, it was content for their camera. Jordan filmed the crumbling porch, his lens catching the jagged outline of the roof against the dark sky. Claire, never one to back down from a challenge, walked straight up to the broken front door and pushed it open, the wood groaning like a living thing. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," she said, her voice echoing through the hollow rooms. But the echo seemed to linger too long, as if the house itself repeated her words. Inside, the air was suffocating, thick with dust and rot. Broken furniture lay scattered, the wallpaper peeled in strips, and the floorboards creaked with every step. Yet, what unsettled them most were the marks etched into the walls. Strange symbols carved deep into the wood, circling doorways and windows, almost like someone was trying to keep something inside, rather than out. Mia shivered as she traced one of the carvings with her flashlight. "These aren't just scratches," she whispered. "They look like warnings." They set up their campsite just outside the house, but their curiosity kept pulling them back to the front steps. The cousins dared each other to walk through the rooms, to peek into the cellar door that hung slightly open, to press their ears against the walls where faint thumping sounds seemed to come from. Jordan recorded every second, convinced the footage would make him go viral. Yet, when they replayed a short clip on his camera, something chilling appeared. A shadowy figure in the background of the living room, standing perfectly still. Though none of them had been inside at that moment. Instead of fear, the cousins responded with nervous laughter. They blamed it on tricks of the light, or maybe the reflection of their own flashlights. But the farmhouse seemed to listen, its silence heavier after every joke they made. And while they laughed, none of them noticed that the soil beneath the house, the very ground they were camping on, shifted ever so slightly, as though something buried there was beginning to stir. At exactly 2:13 a.m. While the others were still sitting around the dimming campfire, Mia quietly stepped away from the group. Her phone was clutched in her hand, the screen glowing against her pale face. She had been uneasy all night, claiming she felt something moving beneath the soil near their tents, like a slow pulse under the ground. The others teased her about being paranoid, but Maya's instincts told her otherwise. With her hands trembling, she dialed her mother's number, whispering so the others wouldn't hear. When her mother picked up, all she heard at first was heavy breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. "Mia? What's wrong?" she asked. Then came Mia's voice, low and shaking. "It's under the ground. It's moving. It knows our names." Her words were fractured, each one strained as though she was watching something she couldn't comprehend. Before her mother could respond, a faint sound bled through the line, like soil shifting or nails scraping wood. Then came a sudden gasp, and the call cut off. Back at the campsite, the cousins hadn't realized Mia had wandered off. They were too busy arguing about whether they should explore the farmhouse cellar before sunrise. It wasn't until Jordan noticed her phone, lying in the dirt near the edge of the trees, still glowing, still connected to the call log, that they realized she was gone. But by then, the woods had grown impossibly silent, and their flashlights seemed weaker, swallowed by the shadows between the trees. Investigators later confirmed that the call pinged from a cell tower near the heart of Hollow Creek Forest, placing Mia only a few hundred feet from where the campsite had been. What troubled them most was the audio recording. Though fragmented, the background contained faint, overlapping whispers, voices repeating the names of each cousin, one by one. Experts claimed it could have been interference or a glitch, but her mother swore it sounded like children chanting, their voices rising in unison before the line went dead. For the cousins, the missing girl turned their night of thrill, seeking into something darker. They grabbed their flashlights, shouting Mia's name into the endless woods, but every cry seemed to echo back at them from the farmhouse walls. No one admitted it out loud, but they all felt it. Mia hadn't just walked away. Something had lured her into the trees, and whatever it was, it had been waiting for them all along. By the time the search teams arrived the following morning, the clearing around the farmhouse was eerily untouched, as though frozen in time. The cousins' car sat parked with the key still in the ignition, doors locked, and a bag of half-eaten chips left on the dashboard. Their tents were still pitched, but something about them was wrong. Each canvas was slashed open from the inside, the fabric hanging like limp skin in the wind. It was as if the cousins had torn their way out in blind panic, fleeing from something they couldn't escape. Scattered across the ground were personal belongings. Claire's jacket, Lucas's flashlight, Jordan's camera with the battery dead. Yet none of these items showed signs of a struggle. There were no footprints leading away from the campsite, no drag marks, not even signs of wildlife. It was as though the 5 cousins had simply dissolved into the forest air, leaving only their possessions behind. The investigators expected at least some clue. A trail, a set of prints, anything. But the soil was smooth, undisturbed, almost deliberately so. The strangest discovery lay near the campfire, where the ash was still warm. Around it, in a perfect circle, were dozens of handprints pressed into the soil. They were too small to belong to any of the missing cousins, resembling the delicate imprints of children. Some overlapped, smeared into the dirt as if whoever, or whatever, made them had been crawling close to the fire in the dead of night. Even more unsettling was that the prints didn't lead anywhere. They began and ended at the fire pit, as if the hands had risen straight out of the earth itself. Forensic teams tried to document the markings, but by the next day, many of the handprints had vanished, erased by the shifting soil, as though the ground was swallowing its own evidence. One investigator admitted in private that he saw the dirt tremble as he worked, tiny vibrations under the surface, like something alive moving just beneath his boots. The official report never mentioned this detail, but whispers spread quickly among the local authorities. None of them wanted to go back to Hollow Creek once the sun went down. Despite the lack of blood or struggle, the atmosphere around the site was suffocating. Search dogs brought in to track the cousins refused to enter the clearing. They whined, pulled at their leashes, and howled when forced near the farmhouse. The officers had no choice but to retreat for the night, leaving the tents collapsed and the belongings scattered. But as one deputy later recalled, just before leaving, he glanced back at the fire pit. For a brief second, he swore he saw fresh handprints forming in the soil, as though invisible fingers were clawing their way to the surface. After the initial frenzy of searches, news coverage, and community vigils, the case of the 5 missing cousins slowly went cold. Weeks turned into months, then years, with no new leads. Flyers faded on telephone poles, search volunteers stopped gathering, and even the media lost interest. The Hollow Creek farmhouse was eventually boarded up by county officials, declared a safety hazard and placed under strict, no trespassing orders. Yet the silence surrounding the case was louder than any headlines. The kind of silence that carried weight, like something unfinished was still lingering in the air. Families of the cousins refused to give up. Ethan's mother kept his bedroom exactly as he'd left it, shoes lined neatly by the bed. Claire's father drove to Hollow Creek every Sunday, sitting in his car outside the forest line, staring into the trees, as if expecting his daughter to walk out at any moment. Maya's mother replayed that final call every night. Even though the audio was grainy and broken, the whispers in the background still a mystery. None of them received closure. Only the unshakable sense that the cousins hadn't simply vanished. They had been taken. Locals, however, had their own theories. Some claimed the forest was alive, that it took what it wanted and buried the rest. Others swore the farmhouse was built over an older burial site, something far more sinister than the stories suggested. The police dismissed such talk, but nearby residents reported strange occurrences, flickering lights in the distance, children's laughter echoing after midnight, and figures moving near the boarded up windows of the farmhouse. More than once, drivers passing by on the forest road claimed to see 5 shadowy shapes, standing together at the tree line, watching silently. The fear grew so intense that the county declared the area off limits after dark. Hikers avoided the trails that led near Hollow Creek, and hunters refused to step foot in the forest at all. Even during the day, the place carried an unnatural chill. Trees seemed to lean closer, their branches tangling like grasping hands. Those brave, or foolish enough to venture close told the same story. The air felt heavy, and the deeper you walked, the more you sensed something was listening, waiting, aware of every step. Still, on cold autumn nights, whispers of the cousins returned. Some people swore they heard Jordan's laugh echoing faintly, or Claire's voice calling out for help. Others claimed they saw candlelight flickering in the farmhouse windows, though no one had stepped inside for years. But the most chilling reports came from families living nearby, who said they sometimes woke to the sound of children giggling outside their houses, only to find small, mud-streaked handprints smeared across their windows in the morning. 5 years after the cousins' disappearance, the land around Hollow Creek was disturbed once more, but this time by construction crews. A private developer had purchased part of the forest to clear space for a new highway. Workers brought in heavy machinery, carving into the earth that had gone untouched for decades. At first, it was routine: trees felled, soil dug, roots uprooted. But one morning, a backhoe struck something solid buried deep beneath the ground. The metallic thud was out of place in the dense soil. Curious, the crew dug further, uncovering the corner of a wooden chest, damp and rotting with age. The chest was pulled free, coated in dirt and roots, its wood soft but intact enough to hold together. It was heavier than expected, and though the workers joked nervously about finding pirate treasure, no one laughed when the padlock crumbled and the lid creaked open. Inside, instead of gold or relics, lay a bundle of photographs, old Polaroids stacked together, their edges warped from moisture. The photos were coated in a thin layer of mud, as though the soil itself had tried to claim them. The 4 men, unsettled, handed the find over to local authorities. When investigators examined the photographs, they froze. Each Polaroid depicted one of the missing cousins: Ethan, Claire, Jordan, Mia, and Lucas, all captured in chilling detail. Their faces were streaked with dirt, their eyes wide open, and in every picture, they appeared half buried in soil up to their chests, their mouths slightly parted as if mid-breath. The quality of the Polaroids was grainy, but too sharp to dismiss as old or fake. What terrified investigators most was that the cousins looked alive in the photos. Not like corpses, but like people trapped in the moment of being swallowed by the earth. Forensics analyzed the dirt smeared across the Polaroids and made a disturbing discovery. It wasn't just soil. It contained fragments of human bone and ashes, too fine to identify, but undeniably human. The samples didn't match any known remains in their system, leaving only more questions. Who buried the chest? Who took the photographs? And most haunting of all, were the cousins alive when these pictures were taken? The photographs reignited public fear. Families of the missing cousins begged authorities to reopen the case. But whispers spread quickly through Hollow Creek. Locals claimed the ground had given up its secret, not by accident, but because it wanted to. Some workers reported nightmares after touching the chest, dreams of being buried alive, their lungs filling with soil, while unseen hands pinned them down. Others swore that when the chest was first opened, they heard faint laughter in the wind, echoing like children playing hide and seek just beyond the trees. When authorities finished cataloging the Polaroids, they believed they had seen everything the chest contained. But as one technician carefully lifted the damp stack from the bottom, a final photograph slipped free, tucked between the rotting wood and a layer of soil. Unlike the others, this Polaroid hadn't fully developed. Its surface was streaked with gray smudges, the image faint, as though it had been taken recently, but hidden away before the chemicals could settle. Out of curiosity, investigators sent it to a lab for restoration. Days later, the results left everyone shaken. The restored image showed all 5 cousins standing together in front of the Hollow Creek farmhouse. Their clothes were filthy, their skin streaked with mud, yet they were unmistakably the same teenagers who had vanished 5 years earlier. None of them appeared injured, but their expressions were unsettling. Blank, almost mechanical, their eyes unfocused as if staring past the camera. Stranger still, the condition of the photo suggested it had been taken only weeks before it was unearthed. The impossible question hung heavy in the air. How could they appear alive, unchanged, after all this time? Authorities tried to contain the photo from public release, but word leaked quickly. Families of the cousins were torn between hope and dread. Some believed it was proof the 5 were still alive, trapped somewhere in the forest. Others feared the opposite, that whatever force had claimed them was using their likeness, wearing their faces like masks. Rumors spread online, theories ranging from time loops to occult rituals, each darker than the last. But one thing was certain: the cousins were never meant to be forgotten, and someone, or something, had made sure of it. What unsettled investigators most wasn't just the cousins' appearance, but the detail in the background of the photograph. Behind them, through the broken farmhouse doorway, dozens of pale faces seemed to be peering out. Faces too small, too narrow, like children watching from the shadows. Some were blurred, half-formed, as though they weren't fully human. Analysts dismissed it as photographic damage, but officers on the case privately admitted the faces looked real. Too real. The chest, the photos, the whispers, all of it pointed to a truth no one wanted to say aloud. Hollow Creek wasn't finished. It had given back a piece of the mystery, just enough to remind the world of what it still held beneath the soil. And as rumors spread of fresh handprints appearing near the construction site, families of the missing cousins began to receive anonymous envelopes in the mail, each containing a single Polaroid of their child, taken in different parts of the forest, always with the same chilling caption scrawled on the back: "We're still here." And so, the case of the 5 cousins remains one of the darkest unsolved mysteries tied to Hollow Creek. No bodies have ever been found. No one has been charged. All that exists are the photographs, frozen moments of terror, proof that something waits beneath that cursed soil. The farmhouse still stands, boarded and rotting, but locals swear it isn't empty. They say the laughter still echoes on cold nights, and if you listen long enough, you'll hear the cousins calling out from the earth, their voices muffled, begging to be set free. Some believe the land itself claimed them. Others insist they were chosen, pulled into something older, something that doesn't die. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: Hollow Creek never lets go of what it takes. So if you ever find yourself driving near those woods after dark, and you see a faint light flickering in the distance, don't stop. Don't follow it. Because maybe, just maybe, the 5 cousins are still out there, waiting for someone new to join them beneath the soil.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.